Hello and welcome to this episode of Statistically Speaking. We have recently witnessed a spate of attacks against Hindus in Bangladesh who are practicing their religion in peace. Over the last few months, countless temples have been desecrated, idols have been defaced, houses have been vandalized and devotees have been assaulted. These atrocities against Hindus in Bangladesh are a cause of deep concern. However, rather than taking tangible action to curb the attacks, Bangladeshi authorities are turning a complete blind eye. NewsX has now conducted a survey to understand the pulse of the people on the matter. The first question that we posed to our audience: do you think Hindus in Bangladesh are being persecuted? 94% of the responders say yes, Hindus in Bangladesh are being persecuted. The second question we posed: has the global community done enough to respond to the situation being faced by Hindus in Bangladesh? Only 52% people say yes, 39% people say no. So clearly, majority of the people think that the global community is doing enough. The third question that we posed: do you think the Muhammad Yunus-led government is responsible for the persecution of Hindus in Bangladesh? 94% responders say yes, it is Muhammad Yunus and his regime that is responsible for what's happening in Bangladesh. The next question we asked: do you think the Bangladesh government is doing enough then to protect Hindus? 60%, majority of the people say no, the Bangladesh government is not doing enough to protect Hindus. The last question that we posed: do you think India should intervene in the persecution of Hindus in Bangladesh? A majority of 96% people have said yes, with the hope that India will do something. What exactly do these survey results mean? I take this conversation forward. I have with me Prabhu Dayal, former diplomat, Pratham Bose, columnist, Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist, and Professor Madhav Nalapat, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, with us on the broadcast. Let me begin with Professor Nalapat. Professor Nalapat, keeping the survey results aside for just a moment, we asked, of course, our responders, do you think Hindus are being persecuted in Bangladesh? 94% people have said yes. I've just had a very interesting conversation with one of the leaders of a party in Bangladesh. Let me just quickly tell you who it was. Barrister Andaliv Rahman. He's chairman of the Bangladesh Jatiya Party. I've just had a conversation with him. He has outright denied that there is any persecution of Hindus taking place in Bangladesh. When I asked him why no lawyer was allowed to represent Chinmay Das in the courts today, which is what Indian media has learned, he says that this is something that Bangladeshi media has not even covered. We don't know that this has happened before the courts. Is the safety and security of Hindus then clearly compromised in Bangladesh?
Well, Devika, I'd like to say that when you have evil things happening, censorship comes along with it. To put a cloak of silence, to put a cloak of ignorance on top of those evil deeds so they cannot be visible. And that's exactly what's happening in Bangladesh. Now they want to ban Indian media, Indian news channels, because Indian channels are reporting the truth, that there is widespread persecution of Hindus in Bangladesh. And of course, frankly, the last 5 or 6 years of Hasina's government, she kind of tolerated this kind of extremists in the belief that, they could be tamed, so to speak. But eventually, they just gained strength and finally they acted against her. So I'd like to say that this has been going on for some time, and you can see statistically the proportion of Hindus in Bangladesh have been steadily declining, and frankly all kinds of obstacles are being put in their way, and it's an appalling situation, frankly. And I mean, so far as the world taking note is concerned, yes, India has taken note, but the rest of the world, I'm not very sure that too many countries have taken note of this. You have isolated instances. Today, for example, your 2 British MPs raised this issue, conservative MPs. You have some people in different parts of the world raising the issue. But so far, governments have not. So has the world taken cognizance of it? Apart from India, the answer is no. And of course, your very interesting question about should India be active in this? Well, there's an overwhelming majority that feels India should be active. The only point is in what way. Thank you, Devika.
Okay, Pratim Bose, bringing you into the conversation. Pratim Bose, um, do you feel that the global community is doing enough or has done enough to really acknowledge the ground situation in Bangladesh? I'm going to request you to unmute yourself. Okay, that's done. Please go ahead, Pratim Bose.
I mean, how could the global community appreciate it? Did we appreciate it for last 5 decades of creation of Bangladesh? We did not. We have, I mean, since 1947, we are keeping this issue under the carpet or just keeping a blind eye. I mean, after 1971, we kept a blind eye. Even in last 5 years, there was a rising tension. 2021, there was major attacks. But for the sake of Hasina, we kept quiet. Actually, we have never taken care of our diaspora there. So we have to pay a price. Bangladesh politics is clearly using the Hindus as a pawn into this game. They have this interim government had lost its popularity. It's absolutely lawlessness that prevails over there. People are unhappy to the core. So they needed something to just keep people under the umbrella, and they just brought it forward. And you said about Jatiya Party, no, I'm telling you, forget those things. You look at the similarity in editorials in top 3 newspapers, Pratham Alo, Daily Star and Shamokal. They are speaking in the same lines. They are saying that Indian media is creating hype. Nothing has actually happened. And I know because I interact with them almost daily. So this is the line that they had taken. Over to you.
Gautam Mukherjee, like I said, I've just spoken to a member of parliament in Bangladesh. He's outright denied that anything is happening in Bangladesh. He says that this is, as Pratim Bose also pointed out, it's being exaggerated by Indian media what's happening in Bangladesh, and he claims that there are Hindus leading processions in Bangladesh very peacefully against Indian media now, and that Indian media and India are meddling once again in the affairs of Bangladesh.
Well, I think Bangladesh authorities are becoming aware that this is getting a whole sight worse. It hasn't improved at all from when it began. Now there are absolute attacks on ISKCON and the priests. They are not letting them leave the country. The Hindus are being ignored or persecuted or subject to violence. Now, what is likely to happen is President Trump, when he is inaugurated, it's going to be another month, almost 2 months, will probably step in, because the Biden administration is certainly not bothered. And Trump is the only one who has said that Hindus are being persecuted in Bangladesh amongst the whole Western Hemisphere. None of the leadership has said anything about Hindus being persecuted in Bangladesh except for Trump. So while they can try and blame the Indian media and accuse us of propagandizing, they will not have it so easy to ignore the West once Trump gets into office, because once he says a few things and does a few things, the rest of the West will fall in line. So they haven't got very much longer to go before they will have to pay the bill for this kind of violence and this kind of behavior. In the meantime, they are hoping that to get as much of the persecution done as possible, so that there are fewer people to deal with when the time comes that they have to. Devika.
Okay, Mr. Prabhu, they are bringing to the conversation. So there is an expectation now from India that we must do something to stop the persecution of Hindus in Bangladesh. Unfortunately, the narrative that is going on in Bangladesh, as I've just explained, basis the conversations I've had with members of parliament in Bangladesh, there's a narrative that's now being spun that in 1971 also India meddled in our affairs and they put a pro-Indian government in place. The same happened, of course, when Sheikh Hasina came to power, and that India has built its relations with one leader, and that's Sheikh Hasina, and not with the people of Bangladesh or with the nation of Bangladesh. So that's the narrative that is now being spun as far as Bangladesh and its leaders are concerned. Given this situation, how would you suggest, what is it that India can do?
Well, first of all, India has to say in one voice that we condemn the violence which is taking place in Bangladesh against the minority Hindu community, and we want the Bangladesh authorities to take proper action. Unfortunately, we have not been able to send a strong message to Bangladesh because of the fact that political parties have not been able to project a united image. It is very essential that the political parties should leave aside their differences and should convey in one voice a strong message to Bangladesh that we want proper action should be taken immediately to curb this unchecked violence against the minority Hindu community. Secondly, not only should we send across this message ourselves, but we should take up the matter with other governments and get them to send this message across. We should take up the matter with the United Nations Secretary General and let him send a strong message also. Because it is important that the Bangladesh authorities should be made to realize that what is happening in their country is totally unacceptable. Let me recall that when the Muhammad Yunus government had taken power in Bangladesh, it had said in very strong terms that every Bangladeshi, regardless of their religious identity, has the right to establish, maintain, and perform respective religious rituals and practices and express their views about without hindrance. But what has actually taken place on the ground is completely different. The Hindu community is being targeted and violent acts are being carried out against it. The world is watching with horror, but unfortunately, the world has not been able to send across a strong, united message to Bangladesh that the authorities there must stop this violence against the Hindus immediately. And we should, during our diplomatic dialogue, make it very clear that India's relations with Bangladesh will go downwards dramatically. Let me mention that just a few days ago, the advisor to the Muhammad Yunus government on foreign affairs, Tawheed Hussain, he said that, well, whatever is happening, this is not going to impact the relationship between India and Bangladesh. He said, what is happening is nothing unusual, and he tried to play it down, just as the member of parliament to whom you spoke also tried to play it down, as if what is happening is nothing unusual, nothing extraordinary, and tried to give the impression that things in Bangladesh are hunky-dory, that nothing is out of control. We must send a strong message to Bangladesh that as we see it, things are totally out of hand. The Hindu community is being targeted systematically, and the authorities there must take immediate action. Otherwise, this will do unending damage to the relationship with India.
All right. Professor Madhav Nala, will bring you back into the conversation. A very interesting point was raised by Gautam Mukherjee as well. We've had in the past conversations about Muhammad Yunus and his links with the American deep state, his links with the Clintons and the Obamas. Do you feel that Trump coming into power next month could possibly have an impact on what's happening in Bangladesh, given he has now also put in place a man like Kash Patel in the FBI, who's clearly stated one of his goals is to dismantle the American deep state?
Well, I'd like to say, Devika, that whether it's Kash Patel or Tulsi Gabbard, they're going to make sure unfiltered information is given to the president, and that is why the the existing establishment wants to block them. They don't want unfiltered information. I'm sure very little information about this genocide is actually filtering in to the higher levels in several world capitals. Along the way, they are being blocked and prevented from reaching the top. And that is where, as far as the US is concerned, if these two are confirmed, then the truth will come out and all these efforts to cover up the truth will end. Remember, Devika, before partition, the violence in Bengal, I mean, Hindus were massacred. You remember in Calcutta, Shahid Sohrawardi was the chief minister of undivided Bengal. He presided over a massacre of Hindus. So unfortunately, this has been the history of undivided Bengal. Now I'm shocked that the member of parliament is talking about 1971 as though it's something unfortunate. 1971 was when Bangladesh was liberated from a terrible genocide wreaked by the Pakistan army. The Pakistan army considered Bengalis to be inferior and they went after them. And this is what the MP is saying, oh my God, what a big fuss has been made about this. And Sheikh Hasina, I don't think so. I think it's India's, as the Indian diplomats, Indian civil society has reached out to a wide cross-section of Bangladesh opinion. That's not correct. But what is shocking to me is that a person can actually say 71 was not a day of deliverance, was not a year of deliverance for Bangladesh from the terrible genocide that was seen then. And that same person, of course, now saying there's no genocide. So possibly he didn't recognize there was any genocide by the Pakistan military during that period. And I mean, he or people who think like him. And this man is not recognizing genocide. But frankly, I'm telling you, it's really deeply, it's not just disturbing, it's disgusting. Thank you, Devika.
Pratim Bose, when we asked in our survey whether Muhammad Yunus's government is responsible for the persecution of Hindus in Bangladesh, 94% people have said yes. How is it that India then now must take that message to the rest of the world as well? Because clearly there is censorship in Bangladesh at the moment. The Bangladeshi media is not covering the persecution of Hindus. They are outrightly denying that there is a genocide of Hindus taking place in Bangladesh. They have no idea. They have not covered the news that a lawyer has been attacked and is critically injured and fighting for his life in the ICU simply because he was supposed to represent Chinmay Das before the courts. How does India now take this information to the world?
Devika, first of all, this government has followed, I can say very loosely, a Pakistan strategy to come to power. If you look at its propaganda, the way it built, and it's very smart. It was under construction for last 2-3 years, and these guys are operating from abroad. They have hired very good, former diplomats and etc. And they are operating and building an argument. So that is one part of the stories. We have a problem because historically we did not own Hindus the way UK or USA own Christians, and that is the price you pay. Third point is why Bangladesh. So many things are happening, and we are discussing what US will do, what UK will do. You tell me, Devika, you are a regional power, you are a 5th largest economy, and we know in geopolitics and in foreign relations, bully power is a big power. How could a small, tiny Bangladesh dare to ignore this fact and do this? Yes, I know that they are doing this for a very desperate thing. I think in a month or so, the power may be transferred to government where the Tariq Jia is probably returning to Bangladesh this month or so, and they are trying to get out of it. They are trying to hand it over to a government which will ratify this illegal government. There is a bigger politics in this. But meanwhile, this is the longest period. Bangladesh Hindus have suffered all across in Bangladesh. But this is one of the longest period that they had been suffering. close to 4 months, approximately 4 months, sustained attacks. These in the past it happened for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 10 days. I mean that was enough. But this time it is happening. And I am not going to use genocide. I am saying persecution of the highest order that is happening in Bangladesh. Over to you.
Okay, Mr. Prabhu, they are bringing you back into the conversation, sir. Some of the leaders in Bangladesh that we've also spoken to, what they are claiming at this point in time is that India is now exaggerating what is happening in Bangladesh simply because India has, and I'm quoting here, failed as a regional power, and it has failed in its relations with Nepal, with Sri Lanka, with Maldives, and now with Bangladesh as well. Is it now somewhere becoming very clear that what has happened to Sheikh Hasina, her ouster, was not simply a political war, but it is also now a power war against India?
Well, first of all, we cannot be said to have failed in our relations with all our neighbors. There are ups and downs in all diplomatic relationships. There are ups and downs in our relations with Nepal, with Maldives. But you know, we have been able to salvage the relationship by and large. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said in the case of Bangladesh. We have all watched in horror how violence against Hindus has been spreading in that country. There have been multiple attacks on the minority Hindu community by extremist elements, and most Indians are absolutely aghast at the happenings in Bangladesh. And if they pretend that whatever we are saying cannot be proved, the fact is that there are several documented cases of arson and looting of the homes of minority Hindu community members and their business establishments. And also there have been well-documented cases of theft and vandalism and the desecration of deities and Hindu temples. So the fact remains that we have enough ammunition to prove to the world that Bangladesh is in the wrong. Now, how do we proceed about getting remedial action? You know, for one thing, we have a number of countries which are close friends of ours in the Islamic world. For instance, the UAE, Egypt, and even Saudi Arabia. You know, these countries are now taking a much more reasonable approach on political and religious matters. And I think we should be able to impress on these countries the need to put adequate pressure on Bangladesh because alone we cannot do it. We need the help of other countries, and surely there are many right-minded, right-thinking countries in the world, like the ones I mentioned, and some others who would be able to impress on Bangladesh the fact that unless it takes appropriate measures to stem the violence against the minority Hindu community, the consequences for it will not be good in terms of its international standing and its relations with a whole host of countries. So the need of the hour is to get more right-minded voices to speak up on the situation and immediately try and put a stop to the horrible atrocities against the minority Hindu community which are taking place in Bangladesh.
Okay, Gautam Mukherjee, one last question to you. If this agenda of radical Islam is to now succeed in Bangladesh in the coming months and days, what is it that India really needs to be prepared for?
Well, whether it will succeed in any kind of medium to long term is doubtful, mainly because they are economically very weak and they do not have much by way of support economically from even the American deep state and China. All of these people are looking to exploit the situation in order to feather their own nest. China has long been looking for a port in Bangladesh. America is reported to be looking for an island to establish a base, and then more or less police the entire region, including India. Now, as far as India is concerned, we have officially condemned the violence against Hindus, but we have to walk a tight rope because we are being portrayed in the West as anti-minority ourselves. And if we were to act in any strong way, at least politically and diplomatically against Bangladesh, this would be seen as something that is anti-Islamic by certain quarters in the West, if not in UAE and Saudi. UAE and Saudi do not have the clout to do much about Bangladesh. They don't have very much by way of dealings with these people. So their influence is limited. Now, India can do a lot by acting against Bangladesh economically because they are dependent on India in a variety of ways. Pakistan cannot replace that. China can, but China will exact its pound of flesh. India can, and India is, I believe, doing quite a lot to put economic pressure. We give them raw materials, we give them finished goods, we give them access, we give them utilities. We are pulling back on all of this. Not only that, Bangladesh is unable to send very many people here. There are Calcutta hospitals which are refusing to treat Bangladeshis. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing given the state of Calcutta hospitals.
Yes.
However, that has been said. Mamata Banerjee is calling for the UN to intervene by establishing a task force or a peacekeeping force. We are treading carefully, as we must. Things will get better once Trump is in office.
Okay, all right. I've run out of time, but I thank all of our guests for joining us to take this very pertinent conversation on Bangladesh forward. With that, viewers, we step into a very quick break.